Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine for a moment the colossal snow-capped peak of Mount Everest. It just pierces the clouds, right? Almost this mythical symbol of human ambition and the raw power of nature.
Totally majestic.
Yeah, majestic, imposing. The kind of place that just whispers, ultimate adventure. But now, get this. On one single day, back in 2012, a staggering 234 climbers reached the summit.
234.
Yeah, it's not just a lot of people. That's more individuals than live in some tiny hamlets all standing on top of the world, on the same day.
Wow.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As mountaineer Peter Boardman once famously called Everest, is it truly becoming an amphitheater of the ego?
That's a truly striking image, and it immediately brings into sharp focus the sheer scale of transformation that has swept through the world of high-altitude mountaineering.
Yeah.
What was once, the exclusive domain of just a handful of intrepid explorers has, in a relatively short time, been fundamentally reshaped.
And that's precisely what we're here to unpack today. You've given us some really fascinating source material for this deep dive, especially a comprehensive book titled Mountaineering Tourism. So our mission is to explore exactly how mountaineering, this pursuit of the planet's highest, most challenging points, has evolved into this, rapidly growing form of tourism.
Right.
We're going to delve into what this transformation means for the mountains themselves, for the diverse people who participate in and support these climbs, and maybe most importantly, for the very nature of adventure as we understand it.
And to really get a handle on this, we'll look at it through a framework that considers three key interacting elements.
Right.
First, the activity itself, what mountaineering tourism actually involves. Second, the people, everyone from the climbers to the crucial, often unseen support staff making it possible.
Right. The porters, the guides.
Exactly. And finally, the unique places where these, monumental experiences unfold. We'll see how these elements weave together, creating both incredible opportunities and some significant, complex challenges.
That sounds like a perfect lens. So let's dive in. Let's start by defining and sort of experiencing what we actually mean by mountaineering tourism.
Okay.
Our journey begins with that sheer scale of participation we just talked about. Think back to May 1993. The British Mountaineering Council had a meeting to discuss the future of high-altitude tourism. Even then, nearly 2 decades before that record day on Everest, there were serious concerns. People were already talking about queues on Everest.
Queues, can you imagine?
I know.
Yeah.
That mental image is crazy. The conversation among these seasoned mountaineers was all about environmental and social responsibility, the urgent need for regulations to minimize the impacts of what they saw then as a growing but, maybe still manageable interest.
What's truly astonishing, though, looking back at that 93 discussion, is that the surge of interest in climbing Everest, and really all the other 7 summits.
The highest peak on each continent, right?
Exactly. That surge in the following 20 years just far exceeded anything those attendees could have possibly imagined.
Totally blew it out of the water.
Right. To repeat that stat, one day in 2012, 234 climbers on the summit. And even more specifically, a record 169 of those came up from the Nepalese side alone. This wasn't just a small increase, it was this profound exponential explosion in participation. It fundamentally altered the whole landscape of high-altitude climbing.
And this explosion, as our source material really carefully points out, it didn't just happen in a vacuum, did it?
Not at all.
It's deeply tied into these broader post-war global tourism trends that brought what the source calls anthropocentric values to mountains. That's a critical idea, isn't it?
It really is. It signifies this fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of seeing mountains as having, inherent value, maybe sacred spaces, untamed wilderness to be preserved just because they exist, the focus increasingly shifted to their value for human experience and, consumption.
Right. What can the mountain do for me?
Precisely. And this shift has had huge implications. Since the 1980s, we've seen nature-based tourism rapidly develop into this mass-produced capitalist industry. This transformation was heavily influenced by the rise of neoliberal economic policies, think deregulation of how natural resources are governed, aggressive marketing of experiences, privatizing what used to be public or community assets.
Right.
Essentially, natural resources, including these incredible, majestic mountains, became increasingly commodified. They got turned from natural wonders into tourism products.
Things you can buy and sell.
Exactly. Tangible experiences bought and sold in a competitive global market. And this fundamentally altered their relationship with human activity. prioritizing economic transaction over, say, conservation or traditional respect.
So with all these people flocking to the mountains and all this, pervasive commercialization, it really begs a fundamental question that our sources dig into.
Yeah.
How do we even categorize mountaineering today?
Yeah.
Is it still purely an adventure? Or has it, in some cases, become something closer to a sport? Or even just, like, recreation?
It's blurry.
It is. And the terms used for the participants reflect this ambiguity. You hear mountaineer tourists, clients, commercial climbing clients, alpine tourists, climbers, even just climbing tourists. Our source material for this deep dive specifically focuses on hard mountaineering.
Right.
That's the commercial or guided stuff.
Right.
And self-guided alpine climbing, often needing technical skills, equipment, as opposed to soft mountaineering, which might be more like a tough hike, less technical.
And this very distinction in words really underscores the shifting definition of the activity itself. If we try to fit mountaineering into a traditional sport framework, well, sport is usually defined as something like structured, goal-oriented, competitive, contest-based, ludic physical activity.
Ludic.
It just means physical activity done purely for fun, for play, not for survival or work.
Got it.
And for many purists, mountaineering is seen as the total opposite of that structured framework. It's an escape, right? A pursuit of freedom away from society's rules and organized competition. Yet what the book argues pretty compellingly, I think, is that in this commercialized tourism context, mountaineering can indeed be thought of as a sport.
That's a fascinating take, especially when you look at the history. Since the very first attempts on Everest and other big peaks back in the 1920s, mountain climbing has absolutely shown competitive traits.
Oh, definitely.
You had nations literally racing to be the first up the highest, the hardest routes, often with huge national pride tied to the outcome.
Absolutely.
And let's not forget the symbolic act of flag planting on summits. That often symbolized a nation's dominance or, asserting political power. Even the founding of the International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation, the UIAA, back in '32, which now represents a massive 2.5 million people globally, that points to an organizational, almost competitive side, even though they specifically differentiate mountaineering from what they call sport climbing on, like, artificial walls.
Indeed, the line has gotten really blurry, and if you look at modern competitive elements, you see activities directly related to mountaineering that now function undeniably as sports.
Like what?
Well, think about organized competitions, indoor sport climbing on artificial walls, or even ice climbing competitions. These aren't just casual hobbies anymore, they're marketed events.
Right, with audiences. Possible.
Exactly. Sponsors, media coverage, they show full integration into the wider sports world. But it's also crucial to remember competition in mountaineering isn't only about beating someone else. It can equally be about achieving personal standards of performance or reaching a specific self-defined level of competence. It's that deep internal drive, pushing your own limits.
And that internal drive, the source makes a really compelling argument, has, working together with external forces, pushed this whole pursuit through an inexorable shift.
I like that phrase.
From being this alternative niche activity to something much more mainstream. And who are the main drivers of this shift? Commercial interests? For sure.
Definitely.
Lots of media exposure. And maybe less obviously, the equipment, including manufacturers. They've all put immense pressure and influence on it, helping this evolution happen in response to growing tourist demands. They've made it more accessible, more visible, and you could argue more marketable.
And this broad shift leads us nicely into looking at the global geography and history of mountain ascent, seeing how these trends play out in different parts of the world.
Right.
Trekking, for instance, it varies hugely around the world. The length, the cost, the specific challenges across different continents.
Totally different ballgame in the Andes versus the Alps, I imagine.
Absolutely. And guidebooks and travel websites often list the most popular treks or must-do climbs, which gives you a vivid sense of the global scale and how widespread this activity is now. Himalayas, Andes, Alps, even the Southern Alps of New Zealand.
Okay, so to really get a grip on how these dynamics play out globally, let's look at some specific examples. First, the really interesting evolution of mountain recreation in New Zealand. Initially, travel to the mountain lands there was mainly for very practical stuff. looking for resources, staking claims, scientific study, pure exploration. Both Maori, the indigenous people, and Pakeha, the European settlers, had specific interests that usually came before anything like recreational fun.
Yeah, it wasn't about leisure initially.
Not really. But then from the 1880s onwards, recreational climbing, hunting, even just walking for pleasure really started to grow. It moved beyond necessity into the realm of leisure.
And this growth got a big boost from major improvements in access and services. A key example is the iconic Hermitage Hotel built at Aoraki Mount Cook in 1885.
Ah, the Hermitage. Famous place.
It's very famous. It quickly became a major destination for early mountain fans. And initially, it was wealthy international visitors who mostly dominated these well-known mountain spots. Like, there's a telling statistic, 2/3 of the 1,400 people who signed the Hermitage Visitor Book in its first decade were international travelers.
Wow, 2/3.
Yeah, it really highlights the early appeal of New Zealand's peaks to a global elite.
And it was actually this international interest that kind of paradoxically spurred local pride and really kicked off local climbing.
How so?
Well, 1882 is often seen as the real start of organized New Zealand climbing, when European climbers first made serious attempts on Aoraki Mount Cook, the country's highest peak.
Okay.
But when the first New Zealand ascent of Aoraki Mount Cook happened on Christmas Day, 1894, just days before a second European attempt was planned, national pride and the intensity of local climbing just exploded.
Ah, beating them to it.
Exactly. It wasn't just a climb, it was a statement. We can do this too.
And a distinctive climbing subculture then developed in New Zealand, mostly modeled on the established British approach. It was deeply rooted in science, exploration, athleticism, and this sort of romantic appreciation for nature. Early discussions around risk and safety were really key in shaping this new culture. They significantly influenced club membership rules, like you often needed to show proficiency before you were accepted.
Setting standards early on.
Right. It established clear expectations for how climbing should happen and, importantly, who should participate. It created a distinct identity for New Zealand mountaineers. And it's also really interesting to see how attitudes towards equipment evolved in this subculture.
Like crampons.
Exactly, crampons. Those spiked frames you attach to boots for ice and snow. They were initially viewed with a lot of suspicion, seen as unsafe and foreign by many locals.
Really?
Unsafe?
Yeah, compared to the traditional method of laboriously cutting steps in the ice with an axe, which guides did. But then by the 1920s, a series of successful fast climbs using crampons clearly showed how useful and safe they were. Ah, proof of concept.
Right. And that led to their widespread acceptance by unguided climbers. It effectively removed that traditional, slow need for guides to cut steps. It was a real technological and cultural shift.
That's a powerful example of how culture, innovation, and just practical experience interact to change a sport. Now, from the European-influenced peaks of New Zealand, our sources take us to a very different historical and cultural place, the mountains of Taiwan.
A different story entirely.
Totally. Here, the story of mountaineering tourism is deeply tangled up with access and control, reflecting centuries of complex human-land relationships. Historically, many of Taiwan's mountainous areas were home to Aboriginal populations, known for their fierce independence and, from an outside view, their ferocious reputation.
Right.
During the Qing Dynasty, which ruled from 1683 to 1895, mountain entry was actually strictly forbidden for Han Chinese settlers. They even set up military bases strategically to defend against Aboriginal attacks.
So, closed off for a long time.
Very much so. It wasn't really until around 1860, with increasing Western influence and the opening of Taiwanese ports for international trade, especially the big tea trade, that foreign exploration of the mountains truly began.
Trade opening things up.
Yeah. People like the Scottish tea merchant John Dodd and the Canadian missionary Dr. George Leslie Mackay started venturing into these unexplored areas. Dodd, for instance, claimed he reached the summit of Zhoushan, Taiwan's second highest peak. That was a huge deal at the time.
Definitely.
But even with these foreign explorations, the broader Han Chinese resident populations were still largely kept out of the mountains, really underlining the deep political and cultural barriers to entry.
Then came Japanese rule, starting in 1895. Initially, their focus was mainly on surveying the land, academic activities in the mountains. Mountain hiking for fun wasn't really encouraged until around 1915.
Why then?
Well, notably, it was after a significant Aboriginal resistance movement was put down. Then, kind of surprisingly, the Japanese government started actively encouraging sports, even suggesting mountain hiking for, off-campus teaching programs for students.
Interesting shift.
Yeah, and it led to a major milestone. The Taiwanese Mountaineering Association was established in 1926, though at that time it was mostly for Japanese participants.
Oh, okay.
Then, after World War II, under Taiwanese self-rule, access actually became stricter again for a while because the mountains were used as military bases against the communists from the mainland. So, another layer of control and restricted access.
Wow, quite the back and forth.
But then, in the later decades of the 20th century, access to Taiwan's incredible mountain ranges gradually relaxed, starting a new era for mountaineering there.
Okay.
A really significant change was getting rid of the requirement for certified mountain guides above 3,000 meters. That gave a huge boost to what was already a popular activity in a country that's literally dominated by mountains.
And wasn't there something about mountain clubs?
Yes. A key cultural motivator that popped up in 1966 was the idea of the 5 Mountain Club, and, even more popular, the 100 Mountain Club.
The 100 mountains concept that sounds unique. Is it just the tallest 100?
Not at all. That's what's so interesting. It goes way beyond just height. It includes deep, emotive, and historical aspects in the classification.
So mountain could be on the list for...
Or its distinctive shape, maybe significant historical records associated with it, or just its profound ability to evoke strong emotions in hikers. There are these fascinating categories like the 3 sharp...
Meaning really pointy.
Exactly. Incredibly steep, almost needle-like peaks that are a real challenge.
Yeah.
Or the 10 green, which describes mountains with such dense, lush trees that hikers literally have to push through tunnels of foliage.
Wow.
And Yushan National Park, home to Taiwan's highest peak, is super popular. They issue over 36,000 permits a year.
That's a lot of hikers.
It is. And even though the source describes the market as somewhat immature, aesthetic motivations like photography and health motivations are incredibly strong drivers for people going there. It shows the pursuit isn't just about bagging summits.
Okay, let's shift gears now. We've talked about the peaks, the history. Let's focus on the diverse human element that really brings these adventures to life.
Yeah.
The people involved in mountaineering.
Right, the human side.
A big aspect here, as our sources highlight, is the profound role mountaineering plays in the narrative construction of self.
Defining yourself through the experience.
Exactly. It's about how individuals literally shape their identity, weave these experiences into their life story through these tough journeys. The source also touches on themes of gender and mountaineering tourism, looking at how gender affects not just who participates, but also the unique experiences and challenges different people face out there.
And beyond this fascinating self-construction process, researchers have also dug into the personality characteristics of climbers. They compare them to the general population using psychological tools like the temperament and character inventory.
What does that measure?
It looks at different dimensions of personality, things like novelty-seeking, harm avoidance, reward dependence, persistence. Understanding these traits helps us get some insight into what really drives people to do such high-risk, demanding things.
So what are the common motivations?
Generally, often reported ones include a deep search for serious leisure.
Seriously?
Yeah, something deeply fulfilling beyond just everyday hobbies. Also, a quest for authentic experiences, a fundamental desire to build or confirm personal identity, or even just a deeper search for self.
This brings us to a really important question many of us probably wonder about. What truly makes these experiences so compelling for people? Compelling enough that they dedicate so much time, effort, even risk their lives.
Right.
Our sources introduce us to the concept of flow, as defined by the famous psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Ah, yes, flow, being in the zone.
Exactly. He describes flow as this state of deep, focused immersion in an activity, feeling completely absorbed. And he identifies 8 key components that all have to be present for a true flow experience.
Yeah.
If even one's missing, it's not really flow.
That's right. And understanding these 8 components is really key to grasping the deep attraction of mountaineering. First, there's a sense of competence in doing the activity you feel capable.
Yep.
Second, it requires intense concentration. Your mind is totally absorbed. Third, clarity of goals. You know exactly what you're trying to do, maybe reach the summit or just get to the next safe spot. Fourth, immediate feedback from the activity the rock holds, the ice axe placement. You feel your progress instantly. Fifth, a sense of deep, focused involvement. No distractions, no random thought.
Laser focus.
Totally. Sixth, a powerful sense of control over the activity and your surroundings. Seventh, a loss of self-consciousness. Your ego kind of dissolves. You're just doing. And finally, eighth, a sense of time being truncated. Hours feel like minutes.
All 8 have to be there.
All 8. If even one component is missing, Csikszentmihalyi says it's not true flow.
And it's fascinating how those first and sixth ones, competence and control, are so linked, aren't they?
Deeply intertwined, yes. To feel flow, the activity can't be too easy that leads to boredom or too difficult, which causes frustration and anxiety.
Right, the sweet spot.
Exactly. You have to feel capable of doing a moderately challenging task, and crucially, you need to perceive a degree of control over how you do it, especially when things get tricky. It's not just being in control, but actively exercising control when things are unpredictable. And, interestingly, our source points out that trust in other participants, your climbing partners, your guide is incredibly important for feeling that essential sense of control in a team situation.
That makes sense. You need to trust the rope, trust the person holding it.
Absolutely. Now, when we apply this flow concept directly to climbing, the sources suggest that flow is felt more frequently as the class of mountaineering gets higher.
Higher class means more technical.
Exactly. They use a classic system. Class 1 is like basic hiking, hands usually not needed. It goes all the way up to Class 6, which is direct aid climbing, using ropes, protection, mechanical devices as handholds to get up sheer faces.
Okay.
It's in those more vertical, technically demanding climbs classes 4 through 6, involving exposed scrambling, roped climbing, where flow is often described as more or less continuous.
Wow.
The sheer intensity of concentration needed, combined with those amazing panoramic views, leads climbers to report this profound transcendence of self.
Transcendence of self. What does that feel like?
They describe feeling totally at one with the mountain, the clouds, the sun, even the tiny bugs on the rock face. It's this deep connection to a system of action that's way more complex and all-encompassing than everyday life. It strips away the mundane.
You can absolutely picture that kind of intense focus. But it's not all nonstop transcendent bliss, is it? The sources seem realistic about that.
No, definitely not. Flow is in a constant state from the car park to the summit and back.
Right.
There's often the dull part of the trip, like the long, maybe monotonous hike to the base of the climb or the slog back down. That part might be enjoyable in its own way, but it's unlikely to generate that profound flow experience.
So you need perseverance.
Exactly. This requires what the source calls perseverance in serious leisure, recognizing that not every single moment is optimal, but the overall pursuit, the commitment to the whole journey is still deeply rewarding and defines the value of the whole thing. The contrast actually amplifies those peak flow moments.
Okay, moving from the climber's personal internal world, let's shift focus to the unsung heroes and the sometimes harsh commercial realities that underpin a lot of modern mountaineering. I'm talking about the guides, the porters, and their critical, often overlooked impact.
A crucial part of the story.
It's interesting that even way back in that 1993 British Mountaineering Council meeting, there was already this call for reciprocity, this idea of mutual exchange and responsibility between the expeditions, the agencies running them, and the local communities that host these adventures. It was an early recognition of needing to give back.
And a powerful real-world example of this whole dynamic, especially highlighting entrepreneurship and adaptation, can be seen with Southern Alps Guiding in New Zealand.
Okay, tell us about them.
This company was set up by Charlie Hobbs, an IFMGA qualified guide, that's the International Federation of Mountain Guides Associations, the highest level qualification you can get.
Top tier.
Top tier. And he faced significant initial opposition from a long-standing monopoly when he started his own company. It just shows how competitive and often entrenched the adventure tourism market can be, especially in established areas.
But he persevered.
Oh yeah, his entrepreneurial spirit really came through. The business quickly had to adapt to big challenges, especially the unpredictable weather in New Zealand that could just wipe out entire trips.
So what do they do?
They diversified. They started taking commissions in the New Zealand off-season for remote international expeditions. And this wasn't just finding any work, it meant leading search and rescue missions in places as far away as Antarctica or guiding scientists up unclimbed peaks in the Karstens Pyramid region of Papua, Indonesia.
Wow, that's some serious diversification.
It really is. That level of adaptability and willingness to use their expertise globally is remarkable and shows how necessary innovation is in this field.
And how do they handle climate change impact?
Their response to the growing impacts of climate change is particularly interesting. As warmer temperatures have made glacier lakes bigger and more unstable, Southern Alps Guiding actually innovated. They developed guided sea kayaking experiences on these glacier lakes during the summer.
Turning a challenge into an opportunity.
Exactly. Turning a climate challenge into a new tourism product. They also proactively introduced snowshoeing experiences on the valley floors as an alternative to heli skiing, which some environmentally conscious clients now object to because of its carbon footprint.
Smart move.
And this strategic diversification wasn't just about short-term survival, it was also forward-thinking for future succession planning, as traditional guiding activities become less suitable or viable for guides as they get older.
It sounds like an incredible balancing act they're pulling off.
It really is. The very conditions challenging them also offer chances to adapt. Ironically, the increasing difficulty of traditional ground access to the lower Tasman Glacier, because climate change is altering the landscape, means they still rely heavily on helicopter access.
Ah, the paradox.
Right, the paradox of modern mountain tourism, using high-impact tech to access increasingly fragile environments just so clients can experience the spectacular World Heritage Area of Arakwari-Cook National Park. And they even have future plans for a health spa and inn to complement their existing cafe, aiming for this full-circle approach to mountain tourism, relaxation, and wellness alongside the extreme adventure.
Now, here's where the story takes a more sobering turn, maybe revealing the stark human cost behind some of these adventures. We need to talk about the working conditions of the Wagumu, the high-altitude porters on Mount Kilimanjaro.
Yes, this is a really important and difficult part of the picture. The sources describe them as playing a truly pivotal role. Indeed, they call them the heart and soul of trekkers on that iconic mountain.
The heart and soul.
Yet, despite their absolutely essential role, they face immense and often deeply unjust challenges.
Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
Just for context, that's Africa's highest peak, 5,895 meters. It's incredibly popular globally because you don't need technical climbing skills, right? It's accessible to lots of people.
Exactly. And it's Tanzania's top earner in national parks, pulling in a staggering 55,553 visitors in 2013 alone.
55,000.
Huge numbers. But the porters, the very people who make this massive tourism influx possible, often endure severe health and safety concerns that are truly, distressing.
Like what specific?
The main issue the sources highlight is porters carrying excessive loads. The official limit is a tough 25 kilograms, but they frequently carry much more, 30, 40, sometimes even 50 kilograms.
50 kilos. That's over 100 pounds.
Exactly. And it leads to debilitating injuries, spinal problems, knee damage, severe body fatigue. And alarmingly, the Kilimanjaro National Park, Kanapa, they prioritize first aid training for the mountain guides, but completely exclude the porters.
But the porters are often the first responders.
Precisely. They're often the ones who help rescue teams in emergencies. Compounding this serious neglect, porters live in constant fear of losing their jobs if they admit they're injured or sick. Sometimes they're even denied their meager pay if they speak up.
That's terrible.
It creates this dangerous, exploitative cycle of silence and suffering where just keeping your job often means enduring pain in secret.
And the economic inequality must be stark, too.
It is. While there's a minimum daily wage set at US $10, the standby porters, who are the largest and most vulnerable group, they're described as highly disadvantaged. They often earn as little as $5 or $6 a day.
$5 a day for that work.
Yeah. And on top of that, they're frequently ill-equipped, lacking even basic gear like proper sleeping bags or warm enough clothing for the freezing temperatures at altitude. This is a sharp contrast to the relatively better, though still tough, conditions for permanent contract porters. It highlights this deep divide within the workforce that supports this booming industry.
And other conditions. Food. Shelter.
Consistently substandard, according to the sources. They get poor quality and not enough food, often lacking the calories needed for such intense physical labor at altitude. There's a widespread lack of proper cooking areas, leading to unhygienic practices.
What about sleeping arrangements?
Inadequate. Porters are frequently forced to sleep outside, often just under ragged canvas tarps, exposed to sub-zero temperatures and harsh winds, while the clients are nearby in comfortable tents.
That's just wrong.
Transport conditions to and from the mountain are also difficult, especially in the rainy season, adding another layer of hardship. The overall reality of their working conditions is described unequivocally as unsatisfactory, despite their absolutely crucial, often life-saving role in making Kilimanjaro trips possible for thousands of tourists every year.
It's a powerful and, frankly, deeply unsettling reminder of the profound human cost that can hide behind these adventures. How someone's personal dream can, maybe inadvertently, come at the expense of another person's basic well-being. And similar ethical and economic complexities, maybe not surprisingly, show up on Mount Everest itself, the very peak we started with.
The ultimate example in many ways.
Everest, which was apparently unknown to the world until 1852, when the British identified it as the highest mountain.
It has quite a history.
It does. Named after George Everest, the former Surveyor General of India, but known locally and revered by the Sherpa people as Sagarmatha in Nepal or Chonlungma in Tibet, meaning Mother Goddess of the World.
Mother Goddess of the World. Beautiful. The documented climbing history really kicked off in 1921 when Tibet opened its borders to foreign expeditions. You had those notable early attempts by legendary figures like George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, whose fate, of course, remains a mystery.
Right. Did they make it or not?
Exactly. And then, of course, the first confirmed successful summit by Tenzing Norgay Sherpa and Edmund Hillary in 1953. That really marked a new era for human exploration and ambition.
And since then?
Since then, over 5,000 climbers have summited the peak, transforming it from this remote ultimate challenge into a global adventure destination.
Big business now.
Huge business. The economic reality of Everest climbing today is a multi-million-dollar industry. Trips can cost anywhere from, say, US $30,000 to well over $100,000.
Wow, huge range.
Yeah, and this wide price range creates intense competition among the outfitters. That leads to different service levels and often a downward pressure on costs that can really impact the quality of safety and support provided.
And the Sherpa people are central to all this.
Right. Absolutely central. The Sherpa, an ethnic group now almost synonymous with mountaineering in the Himalayas, they are truly the backbone of this entire industry. They aren't just porters. They are highly skilled, professional mountain guides.
Right.
They're uniquely adapted genetically and culturally to low oxygen environments. Their roles are extensive and critical. They carry immense loads of supplies, meticulously fix ropes along treacherous sections like the Khumbu Icefall, prepare meals at high camps, set up those camps in extreme conditions, and crucially, perform incredibly daring rescues when climbers get into trouble.
They do it all.
Pretty much. But with these increasing expectations from climbers, who often pay premium prices and expect a smooth, guided experience to the top, ethical challenges are definitely mounting. Everest, unfortunately, operates as a demand-based tourism economy. And the Nepalese government really struggles with limited resources and a pervasive lack of transparency in managing this massive industry. That makes effective oversight and regulation incredibly difficult.
And the dangers are still incredibly real, despite the commercialization.
Oh, very, very real and unforgiving. Climbers face constant threats from avalanches, deep hidden crevasses, extreme winds that can gust up to 125 mile-per-hour sudden brutal storms, and temperatures that routinely hit -40 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
-40.
Yeah. And then there's the notorious deck zone above 25,000 feet. It's particularly risky because the human body literally starts to die from oxygen deprivation.
Right.
Up there, the chances of hypothermia, severe frostbite, various forms of acute altitude sickness are incredibly high. Your decision-making becomes severely impaired.
And the statistics show who bears the brunt of that risk.
They do. The stats are stark and reveal a chilling imbalance. Sherpa guides have a disproportionately higher number of deaths from things like avalanches and ice falls. That reflects their constant exposure and the incredibly strenuous work they do in the most dangerous parts of the mountain, like fixing ropes through the icefall day after day.
While the clients...
In contrast, climbing members, the clients, are statistically more likely to die from falls, extreme exhaustion, or the rapid onset of acute mountain sickness. It really highlights the different risks faced by those enabling the climbs versus those undertaking them.
Okay, this brings us to the third crucial element of mountaineering tourism we wanted to discuss, the place itself. How do these increasingly popular high-stakes activities impact the delicate mountain environments? And what are the huge challenges in effectively managing these pristine, yet obviously fragile, ecosystems?
Yeah, the environmental piece is huge. General concerns are, unfortunately, pretty straightforward and widely seen. Rampant litter, problems with waste disposal, which we'll get into, more relentless trampling of fragile high-altitude vegetation, and accelerated soil erosion are common impacts directly linked to mountaineering activities.
Just the wear and tear of thousands of feet.
Exactly. But the issue goes far deeper than just visible pollution, especially when you factor in the undeniable and accelerating threat of climate change.
And speaking of climate change, our source uses the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's definitive 2013 report to state very clearly that warming of the climate system is unequivocal and human influence is extremely likely the main cause.
Right. The science is clear.
And this isn't just abstract science or some distant threat. It has direct, profound, and often immediate impacts on mountaineering, literally reshaping the terrain climbers want to conquer.
Yes, the changes are already dramatic and visible. Glacier retreat, for instance, isn't theoretical. It's physically altering the alpine landscape. It's opening up new crevasses, changing established routes, creating unstable moraines and rock faces.
Making things more dangerous.
Definitely more dangerous and
Yeah.
unpredictable. And while some suggest that maybe mountaineering and hiking could be an adaptation for places where traditional skiing is becoming less viable due to less snow.
Right, pivot to tourism.
Yeah, but it's far from a straightforward solution. The source points out the unreliability of snow and ice climbing because of these rapid condition changes, warmer temperatures, less predictable snowfall, faster melting. It makes this supposed adaptation quite complex and, in many cases, maybe not sustainable. Routes, once considered classics, are now too dangerous or simply don't form properly anymore for parts of the year or even at all.
That makes perfect sense. You can't just swap activities if the conditions for the new activities are also becoming dangerously unpredictable.
Exactly. And this volatility directly leads to increased hazards. We're talking about an increase in high-magnitude weather events.
Like what?
Rapid thaws that dramatically increase avalanche risk, sudden intense snowstorms even in summer, and a greater overall risk of hypothermia due to unexpected temperature drops. These extremes also put immense stress on existing infrastructure.
Paths, bridges.
Yeah, needing much higher specifications for mountain paths, bridges, huts to cope with intense rain, flash flooding, and more frequent freeze-thaw cycles that literally break apart rock and ice.
And wasn't there something about permafrost?
Critically, yes. There's the pervasive and growing issue of rock instability caused by permafrost thaw, particularly in areas like the iconic Swiss Alps. In places like Pontresina, St. Moritz, Zermatt, where high-altitude permafrost used to act like natural cement holding rock faces together, its melting is leading to an alarming increase in rockfall accidents.
That's terrifying.
It is. And this thawing permafrost also directly impacts the anchors holding things like cable cars and other vital mountain infrastructure, requiring constant, incredibly expensive examination to ensure safety.
Wow.
Beyond specific routes, regional climate changes, shifts in temperature, humidity are affecting the overall attractiveness, even the biological viability of climbing locations. It can even introduce new disease vectors to high-altitude areas. This makes accurate meteorological data and real-time geological monitoring increasingly vital, not just for safety, but for the very future planning of these regions.
The future for many of these specialized mountaineering destinations sounds, well, pretty uncertain.
It really is. The adaptive capacity of these places, particularly those relying heavily on glaciers, ice, and stable snowpack, is largely unknown. While some places might adapt through activity substitution, maybe more via ferrata climbing, which uses finked cables and ladders on rock faces.
You're right, less reliant on ice.
Exactly. But it's highly likely that specialized glacier and ice climb destinations will face dramatically shorter seasons, or, tragically, might have to be completely abandoned as viable, safe climbing areas. It's a stark picture of a sport being fundamentally reshaped by environmental change.
Okay, let's get even more specific about the immediate, tangible environmental challenges. Let's look at case study 7, the complex and, frankly, often disgusting problem of managing human waste on Mount Aconcagua.
Ah, yes, Aconcagua, highest peak in the southern hemisphere, right, in the Argentinian Andes.
That's the one, 6,962 meters. The problem there, according to the source, is the significant environmental impacts and severe risks to human health from improper human waste disposal. It's a stark contrast to older, maybe more primitive, but often less impactful practices like just using pit latrines.
So what are they doing now, and why isn't it working?
Well, the park management has tried various systems, but each seems to have major flaws. In the relatively lower and intermediate alpine zones, they use flush toilets connected to septic tanks.
Sounds okay.
But because of the cold and dry conditions at those altitudes, decomposition in the septic tanks is severely limited. Plus, their capacity is often exceeded drastically. The sources mention an astonishing 170,000 liters of wastewater coming from just one popular campsite annually.
Wow, where does it all go?
It leads directly to pollution of soils and vital water bodies as the untreated waste overflows or seeps out.
Not good. What about higher up?
Higher up, in the high alpine zones where you can't build infrastructure, they have a barrel collection system. Human solid waste is collected in removable barrels and then flown out by helicopters. That sounds expensive.
Incredibly expensive. Around $36,000 a year for over 120 barrels, needing more than 60 noisy, carbon-intensive helicopter flights. And here's the kicker. To reduce weight for these costly flights, the barrels are often designed with holes in the bottom.
Holes, so they leak.
Exactly. So despite being collected, there's a constant risk of leaking liquid waste during transport, potentially polluting pristine glaciers and the water bodies that feed communities downstream.
That seems counterproductive. What about the highest zones?
Even higher, in the nival zones above 3,400 meters, where conditions are too harsh for barrels, climbers get plastic bags with unique registration numbers for a pack-out system.
Carry your own waste out.
That's the idea. They carry it out themselves, return the bags to rangers at the base. But non-compliance is a big ongoing issue. Over 10% of bags aren't returned. It's just hard to control in those remote, huge areas, and frankly, requires personal responsibility from every single climber.
And all this mismanagement leads to health problems.
Directly. It escalates into a genuine public health crisis on the mountain. It pollutes otherwise clean creeks that trekkers rely on for drinking water. It adds unhealthy nutrients to delicate glacial lakes. Resilient coliform bacteria can persist on snow and ice, spreading illness.
And the most alarming step.
The most alarming consequence is the severe problem of waterborne diseases. At Plaza de Mulas, a major base camp, a staggering 1 to 2 people are diagnosed with waterborne diseases every week during the short climbing season.
Every week? That's shocking. It turns a dream trip into a potential nightmare.
Absolutely. It impacts the climber's own health and safety, let alone the ecosystem.
So what are the proposed improvements? How can they fix this mess?
The source suggests several things. For lower altitudes, solar dehydration toilets could be a sustainable and effective solution, especially good for dry, cold places.
Okay.
Higher up, implementing solid liquid separation for the waste in the barrels could significantly cut down the weight, meaning fewer expensive and polluting helicopter flights.
Makes sense.
And for the pack-out bags, maybe weighing them when they're returned and enforcing fines for non-compliance could dramatically improve adherence and accountability.
But it's not just about tech fixes, right?
Critically, no. Beyond the technology, the source emphasizes environmental education programs for climbers and regular, rigorous water quality monitoring. These are seen as absolutely essential to increase awareness, foster a sense of stewardship, and hopefully minimize improper disposal in the future.
So ultimately, the book we've been diving into today, it aims to provide this critical and comprehensive analysis of how mountaineering tourism has developed and how it's being managed, with all its complexities.
Exactly. This whole discussion really underlines the vital and urgent need for a deep, nuanced understanding of that complex interplay of activity, people, and place within this unique sector. Only by really grasping these interconnected dynamics can we truly hope to address the profound challenges of tourism as a form of development in the mountain regions of the world, trying to balance human ambition with ecological and social responsibility.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener?
Yeah.
We've journeyed through how mountaineering tourism has transformed, haven't we? From these exclusive, incredibly dangerous expeditions by a select few to a global industry that now offers profound personal experiences for many more people.
Yeah, a huge shift.
But this incredible growth, as we've explored in detail, comes with significant and often pretty uncomfortable challenges. It clearly impacts the delicate mountain environments through waste, pollution, the undeniable effects of climate change, and perhaps most critically, it raises serious ethical questions about the livelihoods, the safety, and the fair treatment of the local communities, and the absolutely essential support staff, the porters, the guides who make these awe-inspiring adventures possible.
It truly is a powerful duality, isn't it? On one side, you have the breathtaking beauty, the profound sense of personal achievement that mountaineering offers. It's incredibly alluring.
Absolutely.
But on the other side, you have the very real human and environmental costs that are so often hidden beneath the surface of those majestic peaks, costs that maybe we don't always want to see.
So as you consider the awe-inspiring heights and the deep experiences that mountaineering tourism offers, maybe ponder this. What responsibility do we as global citizens, as consumers of these unique adventures, truly have? How do we balance our personal pursuit of extraordinary experiences with the collective stewardship of these magnificent, yet increasingly fragile mountain realms? And crucially, how do we ensure the well-being of the resilient people who call these mountains home?